Hi guys, welcome back to the Big Sew Along. I'm Ginny, and today, excuse me, for the first time in quite a while, I actually have a sew along for you. Today we are going to be sewing the Tina Gibbons Tracey Jacket, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Before we do, I am coming to you today from my porch once again because I'm going out of town tomorrow. I'm going to go visit my mom in Casper, Wyoming, where I have never been before, and I'm very, very excited. But that means that today is all about cleaning my house and getting my laundry done, so I have something to pack. And so my washer and dryer are running continuously all day, and the studio downstairs is just too noisy. But it does mean that we may have an appearance by one or more of the dogs, because whenever I'm on the porch, they usually want to be out here. Anyway, okay, so the Tracey Jacket is a pretty easy jacket to make. However, there are a couple of things that are a little tricky. It does have princess seams in the front and in the back. That means that the seams are curved, obviously. You will see in the tutorial where I messed up a little bit. I sewed the side fronts and the side fronts and the center fronts together, and the backs and the side backs together with 5/8 inch seam allowances, which is incorrect. The seam allowances on this pattern are 3/8 of an inch, and if you use 5/8 of an inch, it's going to be harder to get those pieces in because of that curve, but also it is going to make your armhole the wrong size. So just be aware of that. I talked last week about making this in denim. I really wanted to make it in denim. I just didn't have any denim. I may actually order some denim. I found some good looking denim at Stone Mountain and Daughter, but I didn't have any in my stash, and I was at work last week, and the only denim we had in stock was something I just really didn't like. It was a washed out color, which would have been good if it had been like a faded washed out color, but it was really just like a blue, like a brighter blue denim, and I was not into it at all. So this week I made mine out of the regular medium weight linen from fabricstore.com, and I can't remember, it looks pretty orange to me, but I'm almost certain this color is actually called Barn Red. The lining for my jacket, and I did do a lining, you don't have to do a lining. There is a facing piece for the back and the front if you would rather not do a lining. For me, it's easier, especially with linen, because it frays so much, it's easier for me to just put the lining in, and as it's a jacket, it gives it a little bit more structure and keeps it, keeps its shape a little better. So that's why I chose to line mine. My lining is just a it's a 100% cotton that I got from, what's it called? Rusty Crow, probably a year or two ago. It's a real neutral color. I used it for lining and something else, and I had some left over, and that's what this is. Okay, so the tutorial is about 17 minutes long, and I will leave, what's it called? Timestamps? Timestamps in the notes. If you want to go straight to the tutorial and not listen to me yammer on, or if you want to skip through the tutorial and not look at it at all, timestamps for that stuff will be below. Alright, so here's the tutorial, and then we'll be back to chat a little more. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our center back piece. We should have two of these if we're lining this. This is my outer fabric, and this is my lining. And we're going to just stitch this little inverted pleat right here. So with right sides together, just like this, you can see I've marked mine. I'm just going to stitch it right from there to there, and just be sure to back stitch because this is a pleat. I'm going to go ahead and do mine on my lining as well, since I'm already going to be over there. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is I have these side panels right sides together. There's one and there's one. Now the thing is, this corner needs to match at your 5/8 inch where your seam allowance is. So roughly right there, it's where you want them to meet. So I'm going to place this, I hope you can see this, I'm making a little tail here. So that
these two pieces meet right at about 5/8 of an inch, and I'll show you why in just a minute. And now I'm gonna pin this other end, the bottom edge. And then we're gonna have to ease this in here, and you may need to do some clipping in this piece, the side back piece, but I'm gonna try to measure it like right pretty much in the middle, and then ease the rest of this in. That's too far over. Put it right about there. And I'm just gonna try to ease this in. And remember, it needs to lay flat at the seam line, not necessarily at this cut edge. So, I feel like that's gonna work right there. And that feels pretty good right there. Yeah. And then the same thing on this edge. We're just gonna try to ease that in. Here, I'm gonna put these pins this way just for a second so I can show you. Because once we've sewn this at our 5/8 inch seam allowance, when we open this up, we want that. See that smooth? If you put this point right at the edge, I'll show you what happens. So if you put those 2 points right together and sew this at 5/8 of an inch, then when you open it, you're gonna have this big gap here. Do you see where that is? So that's what we're trying to avoid. So we're gonna offset this point by about 5/8 of an inch. I'm gonna lift that up, and that's about 5/8 of an inch right there. So I'm not too particular about it, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Like right about there looks good. See how those two meet? At about 5/8 of an inch in. That's what we're looking for. Okay, now the bottom. And then again, we're gonna just try to ease this in. Right there looks pretty good. Yeah, that's gonna fit in just fine. If you're having trouble, like I said, you can put some small snips in your side back piece to get it to expand into the same width as your center back piece. Sorry, same length as your center back piece. Okay. That's gonna go like that. That's pretty good. Alright, so now I'm just going to go sew those with my 5/8 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on my lining piece. Sewing 2 side seams. I hope you can see those little tails sticking up there. Okay, so I've gone ahead and put my side back panels on, and then I did a row of top stitching on each side. I pressed my seam allowances towards the center panel, and then I did the top stitching on the edge here and on the edge here. Hope you can see that. And then you can see how when we offset those edges, that armhole edge matches up pretty well. Okay, and I did the same thing on my lining piece. Now we're just going to do the exact same thing on our front pieces. The difference is that we have 2 front pieces instead of 1. So it'll look like this. And you should actually have 4 total front pieces because you have 2 for the outer and 2 for the inner. Instead of using a lining fabric, they instruct you to use the same fashion fabric for the front panels. That way when your jacket opens, you'll see the same color on the inside. Okay, so this is my front. This is the right side. I apologize, my washing machine is making crazy noises. So now we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to put these right sides together. This one goes here. So I'm going to put it like this. And this one this way, like this. Now, let's just do one side at a time. Again, we're going to offset this point by about 5/8 of an inch. So it needs to be probably right about there. Alright, so now I'm just going to go to the sewing machine and sew that with my 5/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and then I'm going to do the lining pieces exactly the same way. And then I am going to press my seams towards the center front and do my top stitching again, just like I did on the back. Okay, so the instructions tell us next to do the collar, but I'm going to do this a little bit out of order since we've already got this piece out and we're working on it. I am going to put my right sides together, and I'm going to sew my shoulder seams here and here, and then I'm going to trim those down, press them, and I'm going to top stitch them just like we did with these other seams. Okay, so I have my shoulder seams sewn there. You can see that, and top stitched. But before we go any further, I just want to point out that when I was putting these front pieces in, I was talking about the seam allowance and having that point hang over by 5/8 of an inch. The seam allowance on this is only 3/8 of an inch. Because of that, I did 5/8 of an inch on these seams, and then I realized what I had done wrong, so I had to go back and redo that at 3/8 of an inch. So just be aware your seam allowances on the whole thing are 3/8 of an inch. And if you use 5/8 of an inch, your armhole's going to be too small for your sleeve. So mine's fixed now. So now we're going to go to our sleeve. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. If this is the top of my sleeve right here, that seam, which is right here, and I line these up, you can see that the front sleeve is actually smaller than the back sleeve. But our sleeve pattern is the same. The front and the back are the same, because it's cut in one piece, which means that it's not gonna the center of the sleeve cannot fit on the center seam line here, because it won't fit. It won't go into the front armhole. So what I'm gonna do, and I don't know if it's gonna work, we're just gonna try it. We are going to line up the bottom of our sleeves. There we go. Bottom of our sleeves here. And lay this as flat as we can. And then I'm going to crease this right here at the tip. That is actually going to be the center of my armhole. So now I'm going to put my sleeve like this. And I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to put the right side down. This is the right side of my sleeve. This is the right side of my jacket. I'm going to match that crease up to the center of my sleeve. And then we're just going to go around and pin our sleeve in. Alright, there we go. So now we're just going to go and sew that down with our 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you're not, I forgot to mention this too, if you're not lining your jacket, you're going to want to finish all of these seams. I'm lining this, so I'm not finishing any of these seams, but we're going to go ahead and sew that. Then we're going to do the same thing to the other sleeve. And if you're doing a lining, you're going to want to do the same thing to your lining. Okay, so this is where we are so far. Our sleeves are now in, and they fit fine by doing that little adjustment at the shoulder. And making sure that you use the 3/8 inch seam allowances. Okay, so now this piece is pretty much finished. We're going to turn this right sides together, and we are just going to pin and sew our side seams. And obviously you're going to press those, and you're going to do the same thing to your, same thing to the other side, and also to your lining. And then we're going to move on to our collar, which is this piece, and you should have 2 of these. And we're going to open them out, put right sides together. If you haven't already done it, put a little mark at the center of your collar. You can also interface this if you want to. I did not interface mine, but so we're going to just put these right sides together, and we're going to go ahead and sew these with our 3/8 inch seam allowance, and we're going to go from here around the outer curve and back down here. Then you're just going to clip those seams, clip those corners, turn it right side out, and give it a good press. Okay, so here's our jacket so far, and here's our collar. It has one side that's open, and I did do top stitching around the edge at 1/4 inch. And now we're going to apply this collar. I try to get a good way to show you. So I'm going to match up this center of my jacket, which is right there, with the center of my collar, which is right here. There aren't any other notches on this collar. So I'm going to turn mine inside out. I think this is easier. I am putting this right sides together. I mean, placing it on the right side of my outer jacket. And then I'm just going to pin it around. I'm going to do one side and then the other. And when you get to the shoulder seam here, you're going to have to manipulate it a little bit to get around this corner. So just straighten your jacket out so that it matches your collar. Now, since there aren't any notches or anything from matching up on this collar, I am going to measure this. This is the front edge of my jacket, and this is my collar ends at about 1 inch. I'm going to call it like 1 5/8 inches over. So I just want to be sure that this side ends at about the same place, so it looks even when we put it together, or when we have it on. This collar, especially since I didn't interface it, or the neckline of the jacket could have stretched, so we just want to be sure that the collar is going to lay evenly all the way around. So just as a double check, we're going to fold those 2 fronts together and just make sure. And they're pretty good. They're right even. Okay, so we're just going to baste that collar on right now. Alrighty, and that's our collar on. Now, if you're not lining, you're just going to want to put your back facing on and your two front facings on now. But we're going to line this one. It's just, to me, it's just easier to line the whole thing. So I am going to put my jacket like this. I'm going to put my lining right side down. So, as usual, my right sides are together. I'm going to start at the center back neck, and I'm just going to pin that in. And then I'm going to move around. I'm going to match up my shoulder seams, which is a little tricky because you do have a collar in there, remember that. And then we're going to go down the front edges as well. Now, this jacket calls for a band on the bottom for finishing. But if you want a clean finish, you can just go all the way around the bottom. Just leave yourself an opening someplace so you can turn it right side out. I'm going to go ahead and put the band on mine. All right, now we're just going to sew that all the way around the perimeter. Not the whole way around, sorry. Up one front, around the neck, and down the other. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is what we have so far. the next thing we're going to do is put our cuff strips on and then our hem strip on. So for the cuffs, we have 2 of these, and you can see I folded one end under a 1/4 of an inch. It's mine's probably like closer to 3/8. And the way she tells you to do it is to fold one end over like this, wrap your cuff around like this, and sew it down along the edge here. And that is fine. You can totally do it that way. When you do that though, you're going to fold this over to the inside. And when you do that, that leaves this little opening here. I hope you can see that. So when you fold it this way, that's just not a very stable join, and I actually just don't like this opening personally. That's just it's a personal thing. You can do it either way. For me, what I'm going to do is I am going to lay my cuff down like this so it's pretty even, and I can see that my seam should be right there. So I'm just going to sew mine shut here. And then I'm going to press that seam open, and I'm going to sew it on around this edge. Okay, so now I have my little cuff piece on here, and I forgot to mention before that before I sewed my cuff on here, you can see at the hem, I basted my lining and my outer fabric together, both at the hem and at the cuff, just to make it easier to do this part. My fabric is super shreddy. Okay, so it looks like this now, and all we're going to do next is fold this over to the inside. I'm not going to bother trimming this down. You can if you want to, but it's not really necessary in this case. I'm going to fold this down, and I am going to, actually I need to go this way. I am going to pin it all the way around, right through this seam. I'm going to make sure that I'm catching it on the back with just a little overlap. I'm going to go all the way around, and then I am going to go to my sewing machine. I'm going to stitch it down right, do my stitch in the ditch right in that seam all the way around. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now, the hem is essentially the same thing, but I'm going to do mine a little bit differently. I have cut my hem strip, you can see, from the selvage, and I would like this to show on the outside. So I'm going to start by pinning it to the inside. And you can do the cuffs this way too, so you could do either one, either way. I'm going to press this, I'm going to pin this down here. I'm going to have a little overlap here at the edge. I'm going to pin this all the way down, and then I'm going to sew it to the inside of my jacket all the way across, making sure that when I get to this side, I also have a little bit of an overlap. I want my band piece to be, I don't know, 1/2 inch longer maybe than my jacket. Enough for a seam allowance, because we're going to need that in the next step. All right, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so that's our cuffs done. That's the inside. Now for the hem, I've gone ahead and I sewed this on, and then I pressed my seam allowance towards that hemband. Now from the inside, I'm going to fold this piece, that very bottom, which I'll turn into the top here in a second. I'm going to fold this up until it just covers that seam allowance right there. Like that. You can feel my seam allowance right there. And now I'm going to put a pin right here, right at the edge where my jacket ends. Right there. And I'm going to stitch straight across that. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Pull this so it's just, see my seam is right there. And this is just past that. And on this one we're going to stitch it right there. You want to get as close to that jacket edge as you can. Okay, so now we're just going to trim this little bit off. I'm going to clip that corner. Do the same thing on the other side. Then we're going to turn this to the front. And then for this one, since it's coming to the front, I am going to pin it down all the way across. And instead of stitching in the ditch from the back, I'm going to top stitch mine right along here. Just under this little line from my selvage edge. And give it a good press. And then we're finished.
Okay, you guys, there you go. So you can see I'm going to show you a few pictures here of me in my Tracey jacket, and I'm going to look at them on my phone so I know what I'm talking about here. You can see that the jacket actually, the sizing, and I should say I'm pretty sure I made a small in this. Yeah, I made a small. You can see that the sizing is good. It is like a 3/4 length sleeve. And just for reference, in these pictures, I'm wearing it with my Tina Gibbons Zelda in white linen, and the pants are also from Zelda in a brown linen. Anyways, okay. So the sizing is good. It was a little concerning to me when I first cut this pattern out. The front neckline looks like it is not going to work. It works out totally fine. It looks really good. It folds over just nicely. I really like that. The princess seams, like I said, you do have to offset them by the amount of the seam allowance, which is 3/8 of an inch, in order to not get that big jagged armhole for later. So all in all, I really like this jacket. I will probably make it again. I will say, you can see here from some of the side views, like I love the length of this and the little boxy shape. I could make it one of you guys suggested that I make it a size bigger, and I think that could be really cool too. Anyways, I'm gonna go here to a picture that I marked up for you so you can see. In this picture, you can see this is the right sleeve. You see that little arrow there that's pointing to this big blob of fabric at the back? I don't know how noticeable it is in this picture, and I don't know how much it matters to any of you. The reason that this is occurring is because that back armhole is so much bigger than the front armhole. Also, you will see in this picture, you can see again on the right hand side on my right shoulder, you can see where the big blob of fabric is. It's just like, it is not that my fabric is stretched out. It's the same on both sides. You just can't see it as well in this picture. That is the shape of that armhole. Is just at the back, I think it's just too big for the front of the armhole and also for the sleeve. Now the thing is, when I did that situation where I just moved the top of the sleeve back, in this picture here on the left hand side, you can see this massive wrinkling under my arm, and that is because we moved the sleeve. Now the thing is, the only way to get that sleeve to fit into that armhole is to move it backwards. Unless you want to change the armhole, which is in fact what I would do on my next one. I would just copy an armhole and a sleeve cap from a different pattern so that it goes together a little more smoothly without all those wrinkles and lumps and bumps. Now, like I said, I'm not, this is not a criticism of Tina's patterns, because I know that that is her aesthetic, and I know that a lot of people like that. I want my shoulder seams to fit. I don't see the point of making something that is going to look ill-fitting. I would rather just alter the pattern and make it fit the way I want it to fit, essentially. So anyways, that's that. If you guys, I may have shown you guys how I changed the armholes and sleeve caps in patterns before. I do it often on Tina's patterns, and again, this is not a criticism of her patterns. That is her thing. It's just not my thing. So I have used this method before to change that, and if you guys are interested in a quick tutorial on how I do that, just let me know in the notes below, and I'd be happy to do that. Aside from that, what else? I will also leave a link to Tina's pattern shop and the Tracey Jacket specifically in the notes down below. I think that's it, you guys. I am going to try to be here next week, but I'm not 100% sure. It just depends on how much time I have when I get back. If I can be here, it will probably be here for a Friday Sews next week. So until then, thank you guys all so very much for commenting and for making a suggestion. I really love it when you guys suggest patterns for so long. So thank you for that. I'm pretty sure it was Rachel who brought that up, and a bunch of you chimed in, so I really appreciate that. I also just appreciate you tuning in every week, so thank you for that. Also, if you haven't already, please hit like, subscribe, and have a wonderful week with lots and lots of happy sewing, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.